I remember the exact moment when everything changed for me. It was 3 in the morning, and I woke up to this strange, high-pitched ringing in my right ear, so sharp and persistent that it felt like someone was trying to communicate with me from another dimension. I sat there in the dark, my heart racing, feeling this overwhelming sense that I was being watched, tracked, monitored by something I could not see. For years I had ignored these episodes, dismissing them as tinnitus or stress, accepting the comfortable lie that mainstream medicine offered. But that night, something inside me refused to accept the shallow explanations anymore. I felt this deep, ancient knowing rise up from within my soul, whispering that this ringing was not random, not meaningless, not just a medical condition. It was a signal. And when I finally discovered what Jesus actually taught about this phenomenon in the suppressed Gnostic texts, when I found the hidden truth that the early church fathers desperately tried to erase from history, my entire understanding of reality shattered and rebuilt itself in a single moment of devastating clarity. What I am about to share with you is not speculation, not theory, not comfortable religious platitudes. This is the forbidden knowledge that got the Cathars burned at the stake, that got the Gnostic Christians hunted down and murdered, that the Council of Nicaea worked tirelessly to remove from all official scripture. And if you have ever experienced that strange ringing in your ears, especially during moments of spiritual awakening or deep meditation, then you need to hear this right now, because you are not imagining it, you are not crazy, and what is happening to you is far more significant than you ever imagined. Before I reveal this suppressed Gnostic knowledge that has been hidden for nearly 2,000 years, if you are a sincere seeker of occult truth and you want to continue this journey of awakening with me, subscribe to this channel right now and activate the notification bell, because what comes next will reveal secrets that have been concealed for millennia, and you will not want to miss the next teachings I will share with you as your friend and guide on this path. This is not just another spiritual channel. This is a refuge for those who refuse to accept the lies, for those who have always sensed that something fundamental is wrong with the reality we have been taught to accept. Subscribe now, because we are going deep into the forbidden mysteries. In the next minutes, I will reveal to you exactly what Jesus taught about the ringing in your ears, in the suppressed Gospel of Thomas, in the hidden texts of Nag Hammadi that the church tried to destroy forever, in the secret oral teachings that only the inner circle of Gnostic disciples received. You will discover why the Archons, those parasitic entities that the Gnostic texts describe as the rulers of this material prison, use specific frequencies to track awakening souls. You will learn the exact spiritual mechanism behind why chosen ones, those souls who carry the divine spark and are destined to break free from the matrix of illusion, experience this ringing more intensely than others. And most importantly, you will understand what to do when you hear it, how to transform this invasive signal into a tool for your own liberation, how to use the very frequency they send to track you as a pathway to gnosis, to direct knowledge of the divine that no Archon can corrupt or control. But I need you to understand something crucial before we go deeper. This knowledge was not removed from the Bible by accident. It was systematically hunted down and destroyed because it gives you power, real power. The power to see through the illusions of this world. The power to recognize when you are being spiritually surveilled. The power to reclaim your divine nature that the authorities want to keep suppressed forever. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered in 1945 among the Nag Hammadi library buried in the Egyptian desert for over 16 centuries, contains sayings of Jesus that never made it into the canonical Gospels, and there is a reason for that. These sayings reveal a completely different Christ than the one the institutional church wanted you to know. This was not the Jesus who tells you to be a good sheep and obey earthly authorities. This was the Jesus who came as a Gnostic messenger, who came to wake you up from the dream of matter, who came to teach you that you are not your body, not your mind, not even your human identity. You are a fragment of the divine pleroma, a spark of the true God that has been imprisoned in this material realm by the demiurge and his archons, those beings the Gnostics called the rulers of this world, the authorities of darkness who feed on human ignorance and suffering. In saying number 24 of the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus tells his disciples something that the church fathers found so dangerous they tried to erase it completely. He says that there is a light within a person of light that illuminates the entire world. But if it does not shine, there is only darkness. And then he reveals the mechanism. He explains that the Archons, these parasitic entities that cannot create, that can only imitate and distort, send frequencies into this realm to locate and track those souls who still carry the original light, the gnosis, the direct knowing of their true divine nature. When you experience ringing in your ears, especially that high-pitched frequency that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, you are not experiencing a medical condition in the conventional sense. You are experiencing an attempted intrusion, an archonic scanning frequency designed to locate souls who are beginning to awaken from the amnesia of incarnation. The ancient Gnostic texts describe how the Archons rule over the 7 planetary spheres, how they created the physical body as a prison for the divine spark, how they use sound, frequency, and vibration to maintain the hypnotic trance that keeps humanity enslaved to the material illusion. And the ringing you hear, particularly during times of deep meditation, spiritual practice, or moments when you are questioning the nature of reality itself, is their way of checking on you, of seeing if you are still asleep in their matrix, or if you are beginning to remember who you truly are. This is not paranoia, this is not fantasy. This is what the Pistis Sophia, another suppressed Gnostic text, describes in explicit detail when it speaks about how the powers and authorities use specific sounds to bind souls to the lower realms, to keep them trapped in the cycle of reincarnation, to prevent them from ascending back to the pleroma, to the fullness of divine reality where the Archons have no power. Let me explain to you exactly how this mechanism works, because once you understand it, you will never be afraid of the ringing again. You will recognize it for what it is, and you will know how to use it as a tool for your liberation rather than allowing it to be used as a tool for your continued imprisonment. The Archons exist in the lower astral realms, what the Gnostics called the kenoma, the emptiness, the deficiency, the realm of lack and illusion. They cannot exist in the higher dimensions where divine light prevails because they are beings of shadow, beings that came into existence through error, through the fall of Sophia, the divine wisdom who descended too far from the pleroma and accidentally gave birth to the demiurge, the false god who thinks he is the only god, who creates the material world and rules it with his archonic servants. These entities feed on Lush, on the emotional and spiritual energy of suffering, fear, confusion, and spiritual sleep. When a soul begins to awaken, when someone starts to question the official narratives of reality, when they begin to practice meditation, contemplation, energy work, or any genuine spiritual discipline, that soul starts to emit a different frequency. They start to vibrate at a higher rate, and this makes them visible to the Archons in a way that sleeping souls are not. Think of it like this. Imagine that most of humanity exists in a kind of spiritual camouflage, so deeply asleep, so completely identified with their bodies and their social roles, that they are essentially invisible to the higher predators of the astral realm. They blend into the background noise of the collective unconscious. But when you begin to wake up, when you start to remember that you are a divine spark temporarily housed in a biological vehicle, when you start to reclaim your sovereignty and your direct connection to the source beyond the demiurge, you begin to glow. You begin to stand out. And the Archons notice. The ringing in your ears is their scanning technology, their way of pinging your location, of measuring your frequency, of determining how awake you are and whether they need to send interference, whether they need to increase the density of illusion around you, whether they need to activate sleeping agents in your life to distract you, to pull you back into the dream before you escape their control completely. In the hypostasis of the Archons, another Nag Hammadi text that the Church wanted destroyed, it describes how these rulers of darkness become aware when a soul begins to know itself, when someone achieves gnosis, and how they immediately attempt to recapture that soul through various means, through manipulation of emotions, through invasive thoughts, through the creation of obstacles and confusion in the material world. But here is what the suppressed teachings of Jesus reveal that changes everything. Here is the secret that the Cathars knew, that the Bogomils practiced, that the original Gnostic Christians understood before they were hunted to extinction by the Orthodox authorities. The Archons can track you, yes. They can locate you, yes. But they cannot touch your true essence, your divine spark, your connection to the pleroma, unless you give them permission through ignorance, through fear, through believing their illusions. When you hear the ringing and you react with fear, when you think something is wrong with you, when you accept the medical establishment's dismissive explanations and take their drugs to suppress the symptom, you are essentially accepting the archonic narrative. You are agreeing to go back to sleep. You are giving them consent to continue their manipulation. But when you hear the ringing and you recognize it for what it is, when you consciously choose to transmute that frequency, to use it as a reminder of your true nature, to turn that moment into an opportunity for deeper gnosis, something completely different happens. You take their tracking signal and you transform it into a liberation tool. Before I show you exactly how to do this transformation practice, I need to ask you something that very few people have the courage to ask themselves with complete honesty. Have you ever felt like you do not truly belong to this world? Like there is something fundamentally wrong with the reality that everyone else seems to accept as normal? Like your soul remembers something that your mind has forgotten? That sensation of being a stranger in a strange land, of seeking answers that nobody around you even seems to question, is the first whisper of gnosis awakening within you. If in this moment you recognize that you have always felt this deep spiritual restlessness, this thirst for hidden truths, I want you to do something powerful. Write in the comments right now the phrase, "I awaken from the sleep of ignorance." Do not underestimate the power of this public declaration. When you decree that you are awakening, that you no longer accept the imposed illusions, something fundamental shifts in your consciousness. And beyond that, by commenting, you are helping the algorithm bring this Gnostic knowledge to other sincere seekers, who at this exact moment are wandering lost, searching for the same truths that you are. Do not keep this knowledge to yourself. Right now I awaken from the sleep of ignorance and allow your declaration to serve as a beacon for other pilgrims on the Gnostic path. Now let me reveal to you the practical technique that Jesus taught to his inner circle. The method that has been preserved in the oral traditions of the mystery schools. The practice that the Hermetic texts hint at, but never fully explain because it was considered too powerful, too dangerous to write down where the uninitiated might find it. When you hear the ringing in your ears, the first thing you must do is stop whatever you are doing and become completely present. Do not ignore it. Do not distract yourself. Do not reach for your phone or turn on the television to drown it out. That is exactly what the Archons want you to do. They want you to remain unconscious, to stay distracted, to never investigate what is actually happening. Instead, sit down if you can, close your eyes, and bring your full attention to the sound. Notice which ear it is in. Notice the pitch, the quality, the intensity. And then, this is crucial. Instead of resisting the sound or wishing it would go away, you are going to do something that seems counterintuitive. You are going to move your consciousness into the sound. You are going to merge with it, become one with it, investigate it from the inside. As you rest your awareness inside the ringing frequency, you will begin to notice something extraordinary. The sound is not actually coming from outside of you. It is not even coming from inside your physical ears. It is resonating at the boundary between your physical body and your subtle energy body, at the threshold between the material realm and the astral realm, at the interface where the archonic frequency is attempting to penetrate your consciousness. And when you bring clear, present, unconflicted awareness to this threshold, when you meet the frequency with pure consciousness instead of fear or resistance, something magical happens. The frequency begins to change. It begins to transform. Because consciousness is senior to energy, awareness is more fundamental than frequency, and the divine spark within you has authority over all phenomena of the created realms. The Archons send a tracking signal, but you, as a sovereign being of light, have the power to transmute that signal into something completely different. As you rest in conscious awareness with the ringing, begin to silently intone the word that the Gnostic texts say contains all power, the sound that was known to the Essenes, to the Therapeuti, to the original followers of the way before it became corrupted into institutional Christianity. Intone silently, feeling it vibrate in your chest and your skull. The sacred vowel sounds, particularly the O and the U and the mum, the sounds that represent the primordial vibration of the pleroma, the sounds that were there before the demiurge created his flawed imitation cosmos. As you intone these sounds internally while your awareness is merged with the external ringing, you will feel a shift. The ringing will begin to modulate. It will become less harsh, less invasive. And if you continue with patient, persistent awareness, the ringing will eventually transform into what the mystics call the audible life stream, the sound current, the music of the spheres, the actual vibration of divine consciousness as it flows through all dimensions of reality. This is the sound that the prophets heard, that the saints experienced in their ecstasies, that meditators in deep samadhi encounter when they penetrate beyond the veils of illusion. What the Archons intended as a tracking signal, you have now converted into a direct telephone line to the divine, into a portal through which gnosis can flow into your awareness unobstructed by the limitations of the rational mind or the programming of social conditioning. Seekers who practice this report that after consistently applying this technique whenever they hear the ringing, they begin to receive direct downloads of information, spontaneous insights about the nature of reality, intuitive knowing that bypasses all the normal channels of learning and cognition. They report that they can feel when they are being observed by non-physical entities, and they can consciously choose to allow that observation or to veil themselves using specific visualization techniques. They describe how the ringing becomes less frequent over time as they become more adept at maintaining a high vibration consistently, as if the Archons eventually realize that this particular soul cannot be pulled back into sleep, and they redirect their attention to easier targets, to those who remain unconscious and cooperative with the matrix of control. One seeker I know, a woman who had been experiencing intense ear ringing for years, especially during her meditation practice, decided to apply this technique with absolute dedication. Every single time the ringing began, no matter where she was or what she was doing, she would stop, close her eyes if possible, and merge her awareness with the sound while internally intoning the primordial vowels. She described to me how after about 3 weeks of this consistent practice, the quality of the ringing completely transformed. Instead of feeling invasive and disturbing, it began to feel like a doorway, like an invitation. She said that one night during deep meditation, the ringing intensified to a level she had never experienced before, and instead of feeling afraid, she consciously chose to surrender into it completely, to allow her awareness to travel through the sound itself as if it were a tunnel. and what she experienced on the other side changed her forever. She found herself in what the Gnostics call the eighth sphere, beyond the 7 planetary realms controlled by the Archons, in a dimension of pure light where she encountered beings of immense wisdom and compassion, who confirmed to her that she was indeed a spark of the divine pleroma, that her descent into matter was temporary and purposeful, that she had volunteered to incarnate during this time of great awakening to help anchor the frequencies of gnosis in the densest realms of illusion. When she returned to normal consciousness, she wept for hours, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of finally remembering who she truly is, of reconnecting with her spiritual family beyond the veils, of knowing with absolute certainty that death is an illusion, that the body is temporary, that her true home is in the fullness of divine light where the Archons can never reach. This is not an isolated experience. This is what happens when you stop accepting the shallow explanations of consensus reality, and you start investigating your direct experience with the tools of gnosis, with the practices that Jesus actually taught before the church turned his revolutionary message into a religion of external worship and blind obedience. The Valentinian Gnostics, one of the most sophisticated schools of early Christianity before they were declared heretics and destroyed, taught explicitly about the different types of sounds that can be heard in the inner dimensions, about how to distinguish between the sounds of the archonic realms and the sounds of the higher dimensions, about how to use specific tones and frequencies as vehicles for consciousness to travel through the various levels of reality. They understood that sound, frequency, and vibration are the fundamental building blocks of all manifested existence, that the material world is literally a frozen vibration, a slowed-down frequency of divine consciousness that has become so dense it appears solid. And they taught that by working consciously with sound, by using the ringing in the ears as a starting point for exploration, a soul could learn to navigate the inner worlds with the same precision that a skilled sailor navigates the outer seas. If this knowledge is already expanding your awareness and you feel like you have finally found a trustworthy guide on this Gnostic journey, leave your like right now so that more seekers can discover these hidden teachings. Every like tells the algorithm that this content matters, that this information needs to reach those who are ready for it. And believe me, there are thousands, maybe millions of people right now experiencing this exact phenomenon, hearing the ringing in their ears and feeling confused, feeling scared, feeling alone because nobody in their life understands what is happening to them. Your like could be what brings this video to someone who desperately needs this explanation, who needs to know they are not crazy, who needs to understand that they are awakening from the collective trance and that the ringing is a sign of that awakening, not a sign of something wrong. Now let me take you deeper into the historical suppression of this knowledge so you understand why you never learned this in church, why this was never mentioned in any religious education you received, why the mainstream spiritual teachers avoid this topic even when their students report experiencing it constantly. After the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when the Roman Emperor Constantine decided to create a unified state religion that would consolidate his political power, a systematic campaign began to destroy all forms of Christianity that did not conform to the new Orthodox standard. The Gnostic Christians, who emphasized direct personal experience of the divine over institutional authority, who taught that gnosis was available to everyone regardless of their relationship to the church hierarchy, who practiced techniques for expanding consciousness and exploring the inner dimensions, were declared heretics. Their texts were burned, their teachers were executed, their communities were scattered and hunted. And over the next several centuries, nearly every trace of original Gnostic Christianity was erased from public knowledge. But the knowledge did not die completely. It went underground. It was preserved in secret by various mystery schools, by the Cathars in medieval France until they were massacred in the Albigensian Crusade, by the Bogomils in the Byzantine Empire until they were persecuted into extinction, by the Hermetic orders in Renaissance Europe, by the Kabbalists who encoded the teachings in elaborate symbol systems that only the initiated could decipher. And then, in 1945, an Egyptian farmer digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi accidentally unearthed a sealed jar containing 13 leather-bound codices, ancient books that had been buried for over 1,600 years. These were original Gnostic texts, including Gospels attributed to Thomas, Philip, and Mary Magdalene, along with treatises explaining the Gnostic cosmology in explicit detail. When scholars finally translated these texts, they discovered teachings that were radically different from Orthodox Christianity, teachings about the true nature of reality that the Church had been hiding for millennia. The Gospel of Philip, for example, speaks directly about how the Archons use deception to keep souls imprisoned, how they create convincing illusions that trap consciousness in endless cycles of reincarnation, how they manipulate through fear and desire to prevent awakening. The Apocryphon of John describes in vivid detail the hierarchy of archonic beings, their limitations, their methods of control, and most importantly, the ways that an awakened soul can navigate past them, can recognize their tricks, can refuse their authority and reclaim sovereign connection to the true God beyond the demiurge. The Pistis Sophia, a longer text that explores the journey of the soul through the various dimensions after death, explains how specific sounds and words of power can be used to pass through the archonic checkpoints, how certain frequencies grant safe passage through the lower realms, how the awakened soul who knows these mysteries cannot be stopped or turned back by any of the rulers and authorities of the material cosmos. When you study these texts with sincere intent, when you approach them not as historical curiosities but as living teachings meant for your liberation right now, something shifts in your consciousness. You begin to recognize patterns. You start to see how the same techniques described in these ancient documents are being practiced by mystics and meditators across all authentic spiritual traditions. The Tibetan Buddhists have practices involving inner sounds and lights. The Sufis speak of the music of the spheres that the awakened heart can hear. The Hindu yogis describe the nadis, the subtle energy channels through which consciousness flows, and the specific sounds associated with each chakra, each dimension of being. The Native American shamans talk about the spirits that come on certain frequencies that can be heard as tones and vibrations by those whose perception has been opened. All of these traditions are describing the same underlying reality, the same metaphysical truth that the Gnostics articulated with particular clarity. Consciousness is primary. The material world is secondary. There are non-physical beings operating at frequencies we cannot normally perceive. And the key to liberation is direct knowledge, gnosis, personal experience of these truths, rather than belief in someone else's testimony. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, if you are still watching as a guest, I want you to know that you are not alone in this search for hidden truth. Subscribe to this channel and activate notifications so that every time I reveal new Gnostic teaching, a new suppressed text, or a new ancient mystery, you will be the first to receive it. This community has already helped thousands of sincere seekers awaken from the illusion, and I want to continue being your guide and friend on this path of spiritual liberation. The teachings I share here are not available in mainstream spirituality. They have been suppressed for reasons you now understand. But here, in this space, we speak the truth without compromise. Subscribe now and join this brotherhood of Gnostic seekers who refuse to accept comfortable lies when devastating truths are available. Let me now explain to you the different types of ringing you might experience, because not all ear ringing has the same source or significance, and part of developing gnosis is learning to discriminate, to discern, to read the subtle signs that consciousness presents. There is a ringing that comes from the left ear, and there is a ringing that comes from the right ear, and according to the esoteric anatomy of the subtle body, these indicate different types of activity in your energy system. The left ear is associated with the feminine principle, with receptivity, with the lunar energies, with the subconscious mind and the emotional body. When you hear ringing in your left ear, it often indicates that you are receiving information from the collective unconscious, from the astral realm, from the domain where thoughts, emotions, and psychic impressions circulate. This can be a sign that someone is thinking about you intensely, that you are being pulled into someone else's emotional drama, that you are picking up on the general anxiety or excitement of the collective field. The Gnostic perspective would be that left ear ringing indicates activity in the lower psychic dimensions, the realms where the Archons have the most influence, where glamour and illusion are strongest. The right ear, by contrast, is associated with the masculine principle, with activity, with solar energies, with the conscious mind and the higher mental body. When you hear ringing in your right ear, it often indicates that you are receiving information from higher dimensions, that your guides or your higher self are attempting to communicate with you, that you are being attuned to frequencies of greater light and truth. The Gnostic interpretation would be that right ear ringing indicates contact with the realms beyond the archonic control, with the dimensions of the pleroma, with beings of genuine light who are allied with your awakening rather than your continued sleep. Of course, these are general principles, and your own experience is the ultimate authority. As you practice the awareness techniques I described earlier, as you learn to merge with the ringing and investigate it from within, you will develop your own felt sense of what different types of ringing mean for you specifically. There is also a ringing that comes suddenly, very high-pitched and intense, that lasts only 10 or 20 seconds and then disappears. This is different from chronic tinnitus, which is a constant background tone that may indeed have physical causes related to damage in the inner ear or neurological conditions. The sudden, intense, temporary ringing is what we are primarily addressing here, because this is the type that consistently correlates with spiritual activity, with shifts in consciousness, with moments of heightened awareness. Many seekers report that this sudden ringing happens right after they have had a particularly powerful meditation, right after they have made an important realization about their life path, right after they have set a firm intention to pursue liberation and truth regardless of cost. It is as if the archonic surveillance system immediately responds to these moments of increased light, checking to see if this soul is becoming too awake, too sovereign, too likely to escape the control grid. But here is another layer that the advanced Gnostic teachings reveal. The Archons are not the only beings using sound frequencies to interact with incarnated souls. There are also beings of genuine light, what some traditions call angels or ascended masters or bodhisattvas, who use similar technology for completely opposite purposes. They send frequencies to awakening souls not to track and control, but to support and guide, to offer protection, to provide transmissions of higher knowledge. How do you tell the difference? The simplest way is to notice how you feel. When the ringing comes from archonic sources, it will typically be accompanied by feelings of anxiety, paranoia, confusion, or exhaustion. You will feel drained, disturbed, off-center. But when the ringing comes from sources of genuine light, it will be accompanied by feelings of peace, clarity, expansiveness, or energy. You will feel nourished, aligned, supported. Your intuition, that inner knowing that the Gnostics called the nous, the divine intellect, is fully capable of making this discrimination if you have cultivated it through practice, through honest self-observation, through the courage to trust your direct experience even when it contradicts what authorities have told you. There is a practice that the Hermetic magicians used, that the Kabbalists employed, that the original Christian mystics knew, for working with these frequencies in a very intentional way. Once you have mastered the basic technique of merging your awareness with the ringing and transmuting it through conscious presence, you can begin to ask questions during these episodes. You can silently direct your inquiry to the source of the frequency. You can ask, what is your nature? You can ask, what is your purpose? You can ask, are you here to serve my liberation or my continued imprisonment? And if you ask with genuine intent and you maintain clear, present awareness, you will receive answers. Not in words necessarily, though sometimes it does come as direct thought transmission. More often it comes as immediate knowing, as felt sense, as images or symbols that arise spontaneously in your inner vision. This is how Gnosis works. This is how direct knowledge operates. It bypasses the rational mind with its endless doubts and questions, and it delivers truth straight into your consciousness. Undeniable, self-evident, transformative. A seeker I guided through this process, a man who had been plagued by ear-ringing for most of his adult life, tried this questioning technique and received an answer that shook him to his core. He asked during a particularly intense episode, "Who are you and why are you here?" And he immediately saw in his mind's eye an image of himself from a past life, dressed in the simple robes of a monk, being dragged from a monastery and executed for teaching heresy. The vision came with a complete download of understanding. He realized that in that previous incarnation, he had been a Gnostic teacher during the time of the Inquisition, that he had been spreading the forbidden knowledge of direct divine contact, that he had been killed specifically to silence that teaching. And in this current life, the archonic forces that had eliminated him before were tracking him again, checking to see if he would remember, if he would resume his work of awakening others. The ringing was both a warning and an invitation, a sign that he was being monitored, but also a reminder that he had important work to do, that his soul had incarnated specifically to share these teachings during this crucial time of collective awakening. After that revelation, his relationship to the ringing transformed completely. He no longer experienced it as an annoying symptom to be suppressed, but as a sacred reminder of his purpose, as a call to action, as confirmation that he was on the right path whenever he felt doubt or discouragement. He began to use each episode as a moment to recommit to his spiritual work, to remember his higher purpose, to strengthen his connection to the pleroma. And he noticed that as his fear dissolved, as his resistance melted away, the frequency of the ringing decreased significantly. It was as if the Archons realized they could not use this tactic to disturb him anymore, and they simply stopped trying. But occasionally, when he needed a reminder, when he was becoming too comfortable or too complacent, the ringing would return briefly, just enough to snap him back into full awareness, to remind him that this incarnation is not about comfort or security, but about liberation and service. This brings us to one of the most profound aspects of the Gnostic understanding of the Archons and their relationship to awakening souls. The Archons are not ultimately your enemies in the conventional sense. They are more like a testing mechanism, a quality control system built into the structure of this reality to ensure that only souls who are genuinely ready for liberation actually achieve it. Think of them as aggressive gatekeepers, as challenges that must be overcome, as obstacles that actually serve to strengthen you by forcing you to claim your power, your sovereignty, your divine authority. The Gnostic texts are very clear that the Archons have no power over a soul who knows itself, over a consciousness that has achieved Gnosis. They can only manipulate through deception, through the maintenance of ignorance, through keeping you identified with the false self, with the ego, with the social persona that you think is you, but which is actually just a costume, just a temporary role you are playing in the drama of material existence. When you hear the ringing and you respond with awareness, with the practices I have taught you, you are essentially declaring your sovereignty. You are claiming your divine heritage. You are announcing to all the powers and authorities of the created cosmos that you know who you are and you will not be controlled anymore. And here is what the texts say happens next. When a soul achieves this level of gnosis, when someone becomes unshakable in their direct knowing of divine reality, the Archons actually back off. They redirect their attention to easier targets, because their role in the cosmic order is not to prevent awakening ultimately, but to test readiness, to ensure that those who pass through to higher dimensions have earned that passage through genuine spiritual work, through real transformation, through the fires of self-knowledge and the courage to see through all illusions no matter how convincing. Share this video right now with someone you know who is a sincere seeker of spiritual truth, someone who needs this knowledge, someone who has been experiencing these phenomena and feeling confused or afraid. This information could be the key that unlocks their understanding, that transforms their fear into power, that gives them the tools they need to navigate their awakening successfully. Do not keep this to yourself. The Gnostic path has always been about sharing the light, about helping other sparks remember their true nature, about building a community of awakened souls who support each other through the challenges of spiritual transformation in a world that actively resists consciousness, that worships materialism, that punishes authenticity, and rewards conformity. In the final practice I want to share with you, we bring together everything we have covered into a complete protocol for working with the Archon signal, for transforming any episode of ear-ringing into an opportunity for deeper gnosis and stronger connection to your divine source. The next time you hear the ringing, follow these steps with dedication and see what happens. First, stop all external activity immediately and close your eyes. Second, bring your full attention to the sound without resistance or judgment. Third, take 3 slow, deep breaths and feel yourself becoming very present, very grounded in your body while simultaneously expanding your awareness beyond your body. Fourth, merge your consciousness with the ringing, moving into it, becoming one with it, investigating it from within. Fifth, begin to silently intone the sacred vowel sounds, feeling them vibrate in your chest and your head, allowing them to interact with and transform the external frequency. Sixth, once you feel the frequency beginning to shift and soften, direct your awareness upward, toward the crown of your head and beyond, toward the dimension of pure light above and beyond the archonic realms. Seventh, intend and visualize a column of brilliant white or golden light descending from the infinite source, from the pleroma, from the true God beyond the demiurgo, and let this light pour into your crown, filling your entire being, extending a protective field around your energy body. Eighth, rest in this state of light-filled awareness for as long as feels natural, allowing any insights or visions or downloads of information to come through without trying to force anything. Ninth, when you feel complete, slowly open your eyes and take a moment to ground yourself before returning to normal activity. If you practice this protocol consistently, every single time you experience the ringing, you will notice several things beginning to change in your life. Your intuition will become dramatically stronger and more reliable. You will find yourself knowing things without knowing how you know them. You will experience increasing synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that guide you toward the right people, the right information, the right opportunities at the right time. You will feel less and less manipulated by fear, by desire, by the normal emotional hooks that keep most people trapped in reactive patterns. You will develop a kind of inner stability, a core of peace that remains unshaken regardless of external circumstances. And most importantly, you will begin to perceive directly the multidimensional nature of reality, the beings and forces operating beyond the visible spectrum, the complex web of consciousness and energy that underlies what we call the physical world. This is the promise of the Gnostic path. This is what Jesus actually taught his inner circle before the message was corrupted and turned into a religion of external worship. This is the knowledge that has been suppressed, hunted, destroyed again and again throughout history because it gives you power, real power, the power to free yourself from all systems of control, whether human or non-human, whether visible or invisible. And now you have it. Now you know what the ringing means. Now you understand the Archon signal for what it is, and you have the tools to transmute it into a liberation technology. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue with the practices? Will you deepen your commitment to the path of gnosis? Will you dare to explore the inner dimensions with the fearlessness of a true seeker? If you are ready to take the next step on this journey, if you want to continue learning the hidden teachings that mainstream spirituality refuses to acknowledge, then subscribe to this channel right now. If you have not already, leave your like on this video too. Help it reach more awakening souls, and write in the comments the phrase "I reclaim my divine sovereignty," so that the universe knows you are serious, so that your higher self registers your commitment, so that other seekers see your declaration and feel encouraged to make their own. In next week's video, I will be revealing the 3 secret names that the Nag Hammadi texts say have power over the Archons, the words that when spoken with gnosis allow a soul to pass through any dimension unchallenged, the sounds that carry the authority of the pleroma itself. This is advanced teaching, not for the casually curious but for those who are genuinely committed to liberation. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you do not miss it. Remember, the ringing in your ears is not your enemy. It is not a problem to be fixed or a symptom to be medicated away. It is a doorway, an opportunity, a reminder that you are not just a biological machine drifting through a meaningless universe. You are a divine spark temporarily clothed in matter, a fragment of eternal consciousness exploring the dense dimensions of form, a volunteer soul who chose to incarnate during this extraordinary time of planetary awakening. The Archons track you because you matter. They monitor you because you are dangerous to their system of control. They send their frequencies because you carry something they fear. The light of Gnosis, the fire of direct knowing, the unshakable certainty that comes from experiencing truth for yourself rather than believing what you have been told. Own your power. Trust your experience. Continue the practices. Walk the path with courage, and you will discover that liberation is not something distant or theoretical, but something immediate and real, available right now in this moment, when you choose to see through the illusions and remember who you have always been. The journey continues, my friend, and I am honored to walk it with you as your guide and companion in the quest for ultimate truth.